Chapter 2, adding a new employee. For the purpose of this chapter, to get the full experience of it, I will request that when I'm going through it, just add yourself as an employee on the system. Use your student number as your employee number. You'll see that the system will require a employee number. Use your student number so that you can always navigate back to it later. You can add an employee by going under the I want to box where it says add a new employee. Also, you can just come here under employee. You'll see the first option on the vertical drop down is add new employee. Here is a list of everything that is required before you add an employee to the system. If you've gone through contracts, employee contracts, it's everything that is required on an employment contract that is required to add an employee here on the system. There is an option where you can click here and it will print out all the options so that you can find whether you have all the information before you go ahead and add the employee. Next step, employee number. You'll see while we're going through all the tabs and all the steps, there are options that have asterisks, tabs that have asterisks on them. Those are required fields. All the others without asterisks are just optional, like the eye color of an employee or the hair color of an employee. That is optional, but the last name and the first name of an employee is required information. So I will add my own employee. That is the last name of my employee, and the first name is Kanya. The middle name, you'll see there's no asterisk next to it, so it is not a required field, but you can enter it should you wish to. Initials, and then title, make it a Mr. And then there's nothing else required on this tab. You'll see here, we move to the next tab before we can save and move to the next step, because we need to have filled up all this information before we can move to the next tab. Should you move to the next step before entering all the required information, you will receive this error that will tell you that all this information has not been filled in yet. So you just say OK, and you move to the next tab. You'll see right next to all the required fields, now there's a red reminder next to them to show you that that information is required. So language is optional, so I'll make it English, male, African, and then nationality will always default to South African unless you want to change it to something else. Birth date, my advice is that you always put in the year before you change the date and month, because should you change the date and month before, the system will now reject and say this person is underage to be working, under 16, because the system has defaulted to 2019. And as we know, the law does not require infants to work. It is a criminal act. So there. My birth date. Next tab. On the contact details, the system only requires one contact detail. So if you just put in your cell number, then we will be able to move to the next tab. Please do not put in the email address that you are using to log in, because automatically it will change you from an administrator to an employee. So your access will change and you will not be able to fill all the activity. And also, it would be helpful for our support personnel if you put in your own cell number, so that should we want to contact you regarding something that you did on the system, we have your cell number there and we can just talk to you directly. The address, I'll just So you'll see here under the address tab, there is a selection that says, is the postal address the same as the physical address? So if it is, you will just click here and immediately it will shut down the option to put in a postal address. But if it is not the same, you will just then have to type in all the details there. For the sake of this exercise, we will say that the address is the same as the postal address. Next tab, UIF exemption reason, go with none. But here are all the exemptions reasons by South African law why somebody would ever be exempted from paying UIF. It's because the employee is earning commission only, employees receiving pension payment only, is a learner in terms of the Skills Development Act, seasonal workers. So all the options that are according to our labor law are here to exempt an employee from paying UIF. SDL exemption reason, this is the company reason for not paying SDL, and that would be it's either a municipality with a certificate of exemption, it's a learner, 80% of the expenditure is paid by Parliament, so you're not required to pay SDL, or the total amount of employee remuneration is less than 500,000. This is per annum. So that would be the reason a company would be exempted from SDL, but for the purpose of our exercise, we will say none. And then in standard industry code and standard group and industry code, this is for when you want the system to help you with your training planning for CETA. They would require such codes so that when you submit your training report, everything is there. So when you put in this employee already with the correct codes, your reporting will be much easier. So save and next tab. This is the employee tax profile. So this is where you will fill in when the employee started working. Make it the first of the month that you're working on. And for the purpose of this exercise, let us all just choose B under the nature of person. The nature of person B, the selection says the individual without ID number or passport number, because we don't want you putting in your ID number or your passport number in the system. So immediately that ID number option has been made, has disappeared, and then the tax status is standard employment. Save next tab. You'll see because we put in the employment date as the first of the month, all the screens that require effective dates from now on will always default to the engagement date. So if your engagement date was incorrect, it would mean that you're going to pay your employee incorrectly, and the employee leave also will be accumulating from an incorrect date. So the date of engagement is very important when loading an employee to the payroll system. This employee will say is paid monthly, and you can put in your dream salary there per month. And this is an automatic pay indicator. We use it when we want the system, especially when you're working with permanent employees, when you know that they're on a fixed income, that every month their basic pay will be the same. You can tick here so that the system automatically opens the pay slip every month, and you can just add the extras such as overtime and any deductions that are once off every month. After you do that, save and next tab. Employee dependents, if you have any dependents, you can enter them here, and effective date will be your employment date, but the first name of your dependent and the last name. So if you're not going to fill anything here, you don't have to press save and next tab because there's no changes that you made. The minute you do that, that red line is going to come to say, but you said I should save, but there's nothing to save. So you can go here and say move to next tab. Then we move because we have nothing to save. The position, I am going to make mine a human resource associate. You'll see we have a selection here. Employee organization unit. for the purpose of this exercise, we'll go right at the bottom and just put office administration. Then you save and you move to the next tab. So the system will allow you, if you press move to next tab, all the changes that you made will not be saved on the system. It will be as if you didn't do this at all. So you need to, when you make changes, make sure that you say save and go to next tab. Leave scheme, you'll see the default date is already the 1st of September. In our system, standard leave is always the best option. And then you go to save next tab. This is the employee banking section. The system has cash, check, and EFT options to pay your employees. So you put employees that don't have banking details on the cash, and then EFT, you will see that all the banks that are available in South Africa, actually in Africa, are listed here. So if you're paying somebody from Swaziland and they came with their Swaziland bank account, you will do that. With FNB also, you can pay people who live in Lesotho and such. But because we're not going to put in our banking details in the system, we will default to cash and then save next tab. Here is an employee recurring payroll component. We use this section if an employee has an allowance that will always occur on their payslip. So let's say somebody has a transport allowance, or let's see actually the options that we have. A subsistence allowance, pension, travel allowance. For the sake of our employee, let's just make it a travel allowance. The amount will be, this is somebody earning 150,000, so maybe 10%. And it will ask you these questions. Obviously, this would be according to the employee's contract, whether or not it will be deriving from leave pay, and there are extra options here. If maybe it's for a selected period to say, okay, start on the 1st of this month, we will give this person a travel allowance for the next 3 months. Then you can go to the end of the 3rd month, and the system will know by the end of the 3rd month to stop giving them that allowance. But should you not put in anything there, it will go on in perpetuity until you come back and put it off. So save. See, you can come here now and say show figures. And the system is loading. Okay, the system will show you figures when you press there. When we're done, here at the top, it just says move to next step. As I've mentioned before, if we should just select move to next step, it will not save the changes that we have made. So we need to come here at the bottom, let it update. And it will have a save and next step option for us. After you're done with that, your registration of the employee is successful on the system. So that means this employee now exists on the system. And you can open up the first pay slip to see there's your travel allowance, there's your basic pay. So everything we've put in is now available. Should you ever want to go back to any of the steps, you just go back here under the I want to box. So maybe you want to go fix your recurring pay. You can access recurring pay here and you will be allowed to change it. If you want to go change banking details, access banking profile. And you can go change it. So at any point in the system, you can just change employee details and update as they move on in the company or as their pay rate changes. You just move to the I want to box and you will be able to make the changes. And with that, that is the end of chapter 2.